I'd like to spend the rest of today's class talking about older instruments. This is, of course, piano literature, and the music we're talking about is music that we, pianists, will play on the piano. But much of the music written during the Baroque era was written with other instruments in mind, such as the harpsichord or the clavichord. So I think it's important for us to have some idea of how those instruments worked, how they sound, just to have that image in our ear, in a way, as we approach music written during that time. I wonder if you know the answer to this question. When was the piano invented? And who invented it? It was invented around 1709 by someone named Bartolomeo Cristofori in Italy. And it's interesting to me how many pianists don't know the answer to that question. It's something we probably should know. Our career, in a certain way, was created when the piano was invented at that time, in 1709. But you can imagine that when the piano was first invented, it probably didn't sound very good. It was an experiment. It was a new idea, and it took years, decades, you could even say centuries, before really the piano was more perfected. It made the sound finally really good. The early pianos, from, for example, the 1700s, probably didn't sound as good as harpsichords. Harpsichords had been around for a while. People had been able to experiment with them and try out different things and knew how to make harpsichords that sounded good. But pianos were something new. And Bach, for example, apparently didn't like the piano when he first heard it. However, I have heard a story recently, this was Peter Serkin told me this story, that when Bach did hear a piano, he did have reservations about it, but could see the potential in the instrument. And the piano manufacturer, I forget his name, who showed the instrument to Bach, Bach spoke with him and suggested a number of improvements. And then as he incorporated those improvements later on, Bach apparently did like the instruments that he had created. And it's hard to say for sure, but it's possible that Bach ended up owning a few pianos. And according to Peter Serkin, he even acted as a sales agent for this piano manufacturer. I don't know if that's true, but it may well be the case. So certainly the music from the Baroque era, which we usually consider to be up till about 1750, which was the year that Bach died, was written probably with other instruments in mind. And even music by Haydn and Mozart, certainly their early keyboard music, maybe they even had the harpsichord in mind for those pieces as well. Now, I have to tell you that for me, there's no question I would much rather hear the piano playing music of Mozart or Haydn or Bach or Scarlatti than I want to hear any of that music played, for example, on the harpsichord or the clavichord. However, I think it's good for you to have that sound in your ear and just to consider the sound that those composers imagined as they were writing the music. Let's talk first about the harpsichord. The harpsichord is an instrument which probably you are pretty familiar with, the sound of it. I hope that you've had a chance to play a harpsichord. It's a good experience to find out what it feels like. It does feel somewhat different than playing the piano. The action is a lot lighter. And of course the sound is quite different. One thing that we are all well aware of when we think about the harpsichord is that it has a much more limited ability to play different colors than we can on the piano. But it is not impossible to change color, to change sounds, to change dynamics. And I think it's important for us to know how the harpsichord can make different sounds and what some of those different sounds are. One of the tools by which our harpsichord can change sound is using different quills. Now, the quill is what plucks the string in a harpsichord. As you know, in a harpsichord, it works by when you press down on the key, at the other end of the key is a quill which plucks the strings, sort of like a guitar or a harp, that kind of sound. And you can make that quill out of different materials. It can be harder or softer. I believe it can be located in different places on the string so that it sounds louder, for example, or just makes a slightly different sound. So the harpsichord can change color in that way by having different stops which say, okay, this one will pluck using this quill, this one will pluck using that quill. And so you can switch. Sometimes the stops are operated by pedals that you would change stops using your feet. Other harpsichords have something that perhaps is more similar to what you see on a modern organ, where you see dials and handles that you need to use your hands to change so that it can make those different color changes. Another way that it can change color is something called coupling. And coupling means that when you play one note, instead of just plucking that one note, it will also pluck another note. For example, instead of just plucking one C natural, it'll pluck two C natural strings, and it will just sound a little bit louder, if that makes sense. It's like instead of having one person in your violin section playing a pizzicato, you have two people in your violin section playing a C pizzicato. But coupling can also be used to couple two strings of different lengths. And if that makes sense, you might play one note, and it will play that note and this note. I hope that makes sense to you. That basically by playing one key, the harpsichord can be set using this coupling device to pluck two notes at once. And so what that does is also it makes the sound much louder than it does when you're plucking only one string at one octave. I often think that would be a useful device on the piano. If we could have that coupling device on the piano, if we could play just one note, and it sounded like, we could play octaves of the Tchaikovsky concerto with only one finger or perhaps two fingers. But on the harpsichord, yes, indeed, you can do that. And so you'll see, for example, sometimes in transcriptions or arrangements of Bach pieces, for example, by Busoni, he will add octaves. And that's a way of approximating the kind of sound that a harpsichord makes when it uses this coupling device. Now, I want to play a little excerpt of something here. I'm going to put up a little video here that I found on YouTube for you of somebody playing some Bach. Actually, it's some Scarlatti that you're going to hear, pardon me. And in this Scarlatti, you may not hear it so clearly, but listen carefully and you will notice that as the performer plays one note at a time, you'll actually hear it in octaves, and that makes the sound just that much louder.